Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. I'm Robin Adair. With me, as always, my co-host John Jurisic. And, we're starting this particular show with some pretty rough material because we've just seen Republican Donald Trump defeat Democrat Kamala Harris and once again become president of the United States. We're all shaking our heads about this. It's really tough news as Canadians to think of Donald Trump back in the White House. And, that strongman agenda, I can just hear it ringing through the halls.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends in this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that.
Well, Mr. President, I appreciate you allowing me to join you on this incredible journey. I thank you for the trust that you placed in me. And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
Oh boy, I don't know what to make of all this. I just simply do not understand the mentality of someone who could vote for him, and record numbers of Americans have. So that's going to take some kind of analysis over the next while for figure this out. Was I surprised? Yes, I was surprised. Maybe I was watching all the wrong media. Who knows? But the United States has changed. This is clearly reflected in who they chose to lead. And this might be a global moment, a historical moment that we can, pessimistically look upon. Who knows? This man has no moral compass. I can't believe the things that he has said. Pressure points going forward are so clear for me to see.
Well, let's look at a few of the things that we're concerned about with Donald Trump. And we grant you that all of these things may not come to pass, but they have been promised, they've been talked about, there are indicators around them, and things to be very worried about. So, U.S. pressure points that Canadians should be concerned about: enthusiasm for protectionism, free trade on an even playing field could be a thing of the past despite all our agreements. They're talking about tariffs coming back around the world, and maybe 10%, maybe 20% tariffs for Canadian goods going to the United States, which would be devastating for our economy. A retreat from global engagements. You can watch Donald Trump pull out of the NATO commitments that he's made. The United States has been stalwart with NATO since the Second World War, and watch them do a deal. That's what he loves to say, with Vladimir Putin, and pull out of the support for Ukraine. It's a terrible time for stability in Europe. Embracing authoritarian leaders. This is something we've seen Donald Trump do. He went to North Korea. He's saddled into Russia and to China. And you got to believe people like Putin in Russia and Xi in China are rubbing their hands about this event. And MAGA, Make America Great Again. It's a movement that could potentially change all future international treaties. And it's something that I believe is part of isolationism in the United States. It goes back to an earlier time, back to the 1930s, when America wanted to do its own thing and let the world swing. And let's hope it doesn't get that radical, John, but I'm very concerned, especially around tariffs.
Well, we're going to get some help. On the show next week, we'll be speaking to Professor Asa McKercher, who is editor-in-chief of Canada's International Journal and the Hudson's Chair of Canada-U.S. Relations. Where does our relationship with our American neighbors go from here? No idea. So lots to talk about.
We have to catch our breath now, John. Let's shift topics and talk about something gentler and kinder, which is kind of hard to
Would
believe you're
love
saying that
to.
about the British Columbia election, where we had David Eby and the NDP win by the thinnest of margins. They're barely hanging on to government, barely hanging on to a majority. We'll have to see what happens there. New MLAs finding their offices, finding where the washrooms are, trying to discover how government works, because we have so many rookies in our legislature now. And, the NDP, they say they're going to do things a lot differently now. David Eby's saying he's going to listen. But, some of our viewers, at least, are in askance at some of these comments. For example, Warren writes us, and John, maybe you'd like to talk about what Warren has to say.
Not only Warren, but seemingly a ton of comments on our election shows. Fabulous interaction. Warren states, reality won't be seen until the NDP either change their direction or continue their ideological view of who society should be run. They now have another 3 years to do as their supporters dictate before they need to care about the voter.
Well, I think that this is actually a good time in British Columbia politics, in the sense I'm not sure that John Rustad should have won that election, or that it would be good for the province if he did. He has largely a rookie group. It's going to take time for the BC Conservatives to get their feet on the ground, for the chaff to separate, and they can find out who's going to be strong for them going forward. And if they're going to take government in a year or 2 or 3, you want to make sure that they're in the position to succeed. So they need time to learn the ropes, learn the opposition, learn the legislature. They've got so much to do in terms of building their constituencies, building their programs, getting their funding all in order. So this is a time for them to take a break, and hopefully we get good government in the meantime. And one of the issues that the NDP have been talking about, we've heard so much about healthcare, we've heard so much about crime and punishment, we've heard a lot of different things talked about from the NDP, but you haven't heard them talking particularly about education. But this is also an issue, because this year, for the first time, we have a situation where our students are not actually getting the usual grading between kindergarten and grade 9. The old system has gone out the window, and I think a lot of people don't even know about that yet.
Education system, you're so right, has been under the radar as of late, succumbed by these other huge, large issues. It'll come back. This is soon going to change. The province this year, as indicated, has introduced a new grading system from kindergarten to grade 9. No more A, B, C, and D grades. We wanted to dig into this issue, right? Well, then how are people being measured? Where is the accountability to curriculum? We wanted to dig in, and we are asking former school board chair, conservative campaigner, and YouTuber Ryan Painter, friend of the Victoria Rumble Room, what does he think of schools with no letter grades?
I really try to see it from two sides, because I've talked to parents and they say, well, we don't actually look at the grade, we look at the comments. We look at the comments to see what are the teachers actually saying. They matter more to us than the grades do. Now, obviously, that's not ubiquitous, but I heard that a lot. And so I think this was an effort to try to see, okay, can we move to something that is less grade focused and more focused on core competencies and how students are doing within those core competencies? I never really imagined that this would be applied from K to 9. I was shocked that it was, because from the feedback that I was getting once it was implemented, parents weren't happy. Parents weren't happy, teachers weren't happy, and guess who was the least happy? Students. They hate this. Majority. In fact, there was a survey that came out, I think this was last spring or last fall, that actually rated this, from teachers, students, and parents. So parents and teachers, about 65% opposed this. 80% of students opposed it. And the reason why students oppose it is because it doesn't give them a realistic picture of where they're at. Now imagine you go through school from K to 9 and you get an emergent ranking. It's not a grading, it's a ranking, or proficient, or whatever
Extended.
Extending. You're extending. But imagine You get to grade 10 and all of a sudden grades are dropped on you. Well, if you have no experience with grades and all of a sudden you start getting C's and D's, you're going to be really shocked and think, well, oh my gosh, I thought I was extending all this time. You know what I mean? So it to me, it's ridiculous. Also, in order to have any of these emergent, proficient, extending, whatever, you need to have a baseline of some kind, because that's what grades are. They are grading people based on a baseline. So what is the baseline of all of these? I mean, for me,
So this isn't a pilot now. This has been actually pushed
all across
through
the
now.
province, all across the province, it is happening as we speak.
Well, we'll have much more from Ryan Painter on an upcoming show on what's going on at the BC Ledge as a host of Rookie MLAs come skating, flying in. So much interesting political fodder to dig into, isn't there?
There's so much going on. We
Yeah.
just had our U.S. election, and of course, the ramifications from that, a BC election. That was a huge dramatic moment. And we have the Canadian election to look forward to, or not. And that'll be, I'm sure, early in the new year. Will Justin Trudeau be there? Will it be somebody else? What's the messaging going to be from Pierre Poilievre? So much to look at. And I think through all of this, the financial markets certainly pay attention and swing up and down. And I don't know what they're swinging at the moment, but you got to be concerned as an investor about what all of this means and hoping that it's not going to be too difficult on your investments and your savings. And so we thought we would turn to our regular finance guy to find out what he thinks. David Schneider from Schneider Wealth Management is in the Rumble Room. Let's zoom him in. And now in the Rumble Room, a man who regularly for us follows what's going on in the economy and the business community. We have with us David Schneider from Schneider Wealth Management. Great to have you back.
Good to be back, gentlemen, for sure.
So many dramatic things happening politically. I want to dig into that first with you. The ballots have now been counted. It looks like the NDP is staying in power. David Eby to make some sort of a deal with the Green Party to stay in power. And it's going to be a very tight government. It may not be a long-term government, seeing there aren't that many votes or that many seats separating the parties. However, what does the business community think about this? How do you think most of your business compatriots view another 4 years potentially of NDP government?
Well, I can't sugarcoat it. It is depressing for the business community and the economic consequences to our province. The policies that have been established just in the last 2 years, especially with the clean tech policies for BC, are quite honestly devastating for all kinds of sectors. I sent you gentlemen some comments that 45% of our exports is in the resource sector, and they do everything possible to destroy it. So there's a tremendous amount of apprehension. I think some of my comments as businesses will be looking at leaving. People's wealth will be more leaving. The amount of stories I have in Victoria alone of people going to other jurisdictions, tax jurisdictions, of getting out, unfortunately. And then the other comment is just businesses won't be attracted here because there's uncertainty. It's an anti-business climate. Everybody knows that. We have a more pro-business province next door and the one next to it. And unfortunately, the numbers don't work when 5 new jobs are government and 1 new job is private. When you have one person paying for 5, any economy doesn't work. So it's really unfortunate. We have to work together, even though I think the NDPs have been scared a bit because of what's happened. But unless they don't reverse these clean tech policies, and I can get into it, it's devastating consequences to the province.
Hard to believe they'd reverse on clean tech policies if they have to make a deal with the Green Party, though, isn't it?
That's right. Because are they flip-flopped on the carbon tax? Obviously, these 2 people in the 2 different ridings going to have a lot of power. So it'll be interesting. But the consequences that the people at the BC Business Council and others are trying to convey to the province, from the automobile area to even aviation fuel, they want to be the most strictest in not just Canada, but the world. It makes no business sense. And that's really tough to all of us to watch.
Great to see you again, David, in the Rumble Room. Far too handsome for the Rumble Room. Nonetheless, it's fair to say that what happens in a national Canadian election and in this upcoming U.S. presidential election will send a strong signal to business and the economy moving forward.
Right.
How will markets and business in general receive a return of Donald Trump if that happens in the U.S. in November?
I think there's mixed emotions. Some people worry about the tariffs. I don't think it even comes close to the devastation that the Liberals in Ottawa have provided to this province and to the resource sector in Western Canada. People get all excited in Canada about the U.S. election. I got reminded by my friends down in the U.S. who are dual citizens say it has nothing even close to what Ottawa's done to the resource sector in Western Canada. So don't get too excited. You need a change in Ottawa. So that's, I think, the more important aspect.
So how are things going with the economy right now, both in Canada and the States and all of our Western partners? Is this a good booming time, or is it a
No.
wait and see time? What's going on out there?
Well, especially in Canada, we have a couple of areas that control the market. The energy sector is doing quite well. You got $70 oil, which with the currency, that's $100 Canadian for energy products. And with the pipelines and so forth, the differentials have really narrowed. So it's helped tremendously, especially when you have a sector that's so disciplined with their capital. That's really helped. But the other part is the housing sector. It's gotten killed. The developments that are being built in Toronto, everybody's wondering who's going to buy them because there's so many unsold units. As you know, here in BC, it's stopped in terms of new construction. It just doesn't make any economic sense. And I think we're seeing the ramifications of bloated governments, both provincially and municipal wise, where they use real estate development to fund their operations. When you add 10 to 15% in terms of development costs that we're seeing, guess what happens? The numbers just don't work, and income flows are coming down. This morning, actually, there was a big downgrade of Go Easy. Well, that's a finance firm in Canada that has had a heck of a run, but they're seeing delinquency and all kinds of problems with their debt levels. It's a tough situation, and that's why rates are coming down, and we could see a 50-point decrease soon. It was supposed to be announced on Wednesday because we have high debt levels. We need some help, even though it takes almost a year for it to go through the economy. But things are slowing dramatically, and at the time where everybody knows there's got to be cutbacks in the public sector side, what's going to happen there too? Because that's bloated as well. But things have slowed down tremendously for sure.
David, okay, so we went provincial, we went sort of national, we went global. I'm pulling you back
Yeah.
to local. This BC election was in many ways a fought around managing crime, drugs, homelessness, affordability, and the effect this was having on our urban centers. Clearly, regardless of political affiliation, people are getting sick of this and they want solutions. That is a common thread through amongst all of our interviews. Who is going to provide solutions? Did you hear any of those solutions spelled out during this last campaign?
Not many solutions for sure. My dad used to always say, come, if you're going to talk, come to me with a problem, give me a solution too. Didn't hear many. It's a very difficult side, especially with our population growth. But what you saw was a stronghold for the NDPs was Surrey, and look where they voted. A big part of it was affordability and the crime side too. And that was a big testament to what's happening out there, because that used to be a real stronghold for the NDP party. And that really showed that people have affordability issues, crime issues, and the people voted in that area for that. So it's a big thing. And I talk about the private enterprise system. It has to be enhanced. Many times when people talk about the economy, they talk about dealing with our social issues. I always go back to Milton Friedman's presentation at Stanford in 1978. And he goes, it's not the government's responsibility for the poor. It's the people's responsibility for the poor. Poor was a term. Now we use homeless. And the best way he's always seen is the private enterprise system, the private markets, help free enterprise. It has to flourish. Well, it's not flourishing in BC. There's not the funds to do things. So some of these policies don't make sense. And then all these clean tech policies they're doing on manufacturing. I heard this week with Finning, they want to change their compressors because they have too much emissions. Well, there's no comparable product in the market to replace them. So they're coming up with clean tech policies that are absolutely economically destroying that companies would rather set up in other jurisdictions, not just Alberta and Saskatchewan and Ontario, but Washington and Oregon, because these climate people at the ledge and provincial offices are coming up with things with no common sense, no physics, no empathy to business, and it's absolutely economic destroying. So like it's scary, and they have to be reversed soon. And that's what the BC Business Council, I'm part of the McDonald Laurier Institute now. We're trying to educate the government saying, you can't do this because capital can go out anywhere. And one of the most interesting stories was a major international energy company that looked at Canada and looked at Venezuela for some billion-dollar project. And because that project had to go through BC, they picked Venezuela over Canada. Like, it scares you. So anyway, people love this province. They love the weather. They love the ocean. But so many friends are just going, I've had enough. So hopefully we educate more, but these policies have to change for sure.
We live in a time now where we hear from our governments, especially the NDP, over the last number of years, and we've had several runs now of new Democratic governments, and I think people are almost getting used to hearing that somehow business involvement in society is a negative thing, that business can't be trusted, that business is only out to make profit and kind of take advantage of people, and that things should be run by government. And government is the fair way of moving forward. And of the criticisms you hear around healthcare, that the conservatives have been accused of bringing in private healthcare and going to an American system, only suggesting we should have a diversified system, which in fact the NDP has been employing, but they would never really owe up to it very much because it's a terrible thing to say publicly that business should be involved. All the same, in Canada, we've built a lot of the prosperity in this country by being hewers of wood and drawers of water, our big resource industries, which again are being pilloried by a lot of people on the left, by exploiting our forest, exploiting our natural resources, and yet that's the way we've been able to have such a great economy. Is there a way to rebound on this? Do you think having a change in Ottawa and potentially eventually a change in Victoria as well can reverse this? Because it seems it's very hard set about how people view Canada today in this model.
Yeah, it's very discouraging. I think all of us at my age, my friends, we're thinking about our kids, we're thinking of our grandkids. We see what young people are looking at, and there's a lot of despair out there because they can't afford a house. That means they can't build, have a family because they don't have a proper place, and they've made it so expensive. And I some people might disagree with me, but the policy of many left-leaning governments is let's come up with ideas for them to have more control. They use climate change as a way for more control, and guess what they do? They take more control away from the people, and then they just give back after people's lives have been destroyed. So they have more power. This has been gone through the centuries. And look at these policies they come up with. They make absolutely no sense at all. I shared on my LinkedIn page this week a recent podcast with the people from Doomberg. They're the most sought after and read financial publication. They talked about uranium. He did talk about also before that, he talked about our crazy energy policies and thinks our environment minister is quite honestly an absolute idiot because he doesn't get it. But what's happened this past month in New York was 18 of the major Wall Street banks basically said, we are going to help finance nuclear energy the way we do with wind and solar. It was that moment where it's now going to be okay for people to talk about uranium because it is by far the most superior way for us to develop clean energy to customers. Now, there's going to be all kinds of people that don't want it in their backyard. They don't want it in California, but it is being changed. That's why Cameco went up about $15 in the last week and a half because it is the largest uranium producer in North America in terms of market cap. And it just shows that there's an attitude change. And the big attitude change that's going to help Canada is the tech sector. And why I bring that up is the tech sector needs power. They need power for their data centers. There's not enough power unless we use all the sources out there.
David, this leads beautifully into my final question. Obviously, you're an experienced, successful investment advisor. What are the best and we can't let you go without asking this question. What are the best investment opportunities right now? You might have alluded to a few of them in your previous answer. Is real estate the best place to park money? What are the industries and sectors that you think we should be parking for long-term investments 2024, 25, and beyond?
Wow.
Hey, I don't kid around, eh?
Well, as my mentor always says, you sell things everybody wants and buy things people can't believe you bring up. That's why actually my idea on Monday was TD Bank, as it got killed and it underperformed the Royal Bank by 60%. That's an individual side, but we have some of the best managed energy transportation systems in the world. There's 5 or 6 that absolutely run great operations, and they have operations from Canada, U.S. right down to Mexico, and you know them all. We have great banks. We have great utilities. We're extremely well regulated. We have the leading uranium companies in North America. There's 2 or 3 that are ideal. That would be a core area, and I really think things are going to be changing, because if California changes their stance on energy, that's a big thing, and big tech controls things down there. So this need for data center power, we have nat gas. So nat gas producers, we have many good ones. That's probably another solid area to look at, and it's really nice. And the importance of podcasts. Look what you guys are changing in Victoria. There's 4 gentlemen that have the All In podcast in California, 4 entrepreneurs, and because of their podcast, they're changing the attitudes of Silicon Valley, because they're so well regarded, and they have a weekly show, and they have a lot of power, just like Robin and John.
Well, we're really influencing things on Tulip Avenue. There's no 2 ways about that. Hey, John?
Where I live.
No, you guys have a lot of fun, and you provide a very valuable resource to our communities. And I know it's not just Victoria, but we're right across BC. So hats off to what you guys do.
Great to hear from David Schneider. Interesting that when the announcement came that Donald Trump had won this election, the Dow took off. Big business liked the idea of a strong man, I guess, in the White House. We'll see how that goes down the road, and we'll be keeping a close eye on that story. And as we chug along, John, we chug to the end of another Rumble Room program. Perhaps you can again tell our many viewers how they can regularly follow our show and be part of the Rumble Room family.
It's all a bit overwhelming, isn't it? You and I and a whole ton of people have a way for us to vent our feelings and our thoughts and our, to some degree, confusion about what the hell's going on. You can do that with us on Twitter. You can do that with us on Facebook. And of course, all of our interviews are at our YouTube page. You can hear us if you're jogging and running and weightlifting and cooking by audio podcast. We're also on Instagram. We're also on TikTok. So that's it for me. Johnny Juricic saying, guess what? We don't need to make Canada great again, because we're already great.
That's true, and you're great, Johnny, and it's worth reminding people of that. I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on.